Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
For our last full review show of the year, we're tackling some big movies leading up to next week's Best and Worst of the Year show. We'll be talking about The Wolf of Wall Street, Saving Mr. Banks, Walter Mitty, and much more. Plus, each of us will reveal the 5 films we're most looking forward to in 2014 for our top 5 this week. In the triple feature portion of our show, we watched the indie drama Pariah for our new classic. Old classic chosen by Joe is the 1993 animated Batman Mask of the Phantasm. And our Oscar nominee A to Z is 1985's Agnes of God, starring Jane Fonda. No news this week. We have too many reviews to cover, so we're going to get right to that. And first up is the Martin Scorsese film The Wolf of Wall Street. Joe?
All right. Famed director Martin Scorsese brings us a biographical satire and dark comedy based on a real-life individual, Jordan Belfort. Belfort, portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio, is a young man aspiring to make his fortune on Wall Street. After becoming a stockbroker and almost immediately losing his job afterwards, Belfort joins a seedy investment firm dealing in penny stocks. Through the use of an aggressive pitching strategy, Belfort, along with his wormy cohort, Donnie Azoff, played by Jonah Hill, make their way to the top. However, the film proves that greed corrupts easily, as Belfort sinks into a life of massive excess, filled with sex, drugs, and scandal. Things inevitably catch up to him, as his crazy lifestyle lands him into trouble with his friends, his family, and the FBI. I admit that it took some time figuring out what I was going to say about this one. Firstly, I want to say that the performances were great. DiCaprio and Hill have great chemistry and excellently bring these people to life. Even the minor performance by Matthew McConaughey as Belfort's first boss was memorable. The narrative style is also indicative of Terrence Winter, as the protagonist has a very down-to-earth and spitfire method of communicating with the audience. This is both humorous and engaging. I also found the whole commentary on the chaotic nature of the stock market captured very strongly. The film was filled with the atmosphere of excess, debauchery, and greed. However, there are some noticeable issues throughout the film. The biggest one is probably the length. Though I do understand the nature of showing various scenes with extreme uses of sex and drug use, being indicative of the character's warped development, still, I feel that the film probably could have cut most of these scenes out without too much being lost. The racier scenes themselves do feel a bit overdone at points, but then again it is a satire. I'm also not entirely sure how I felt about the protagonists, as they were enjoyable to watch, but not exactly likable per se. This seems to increase as the film rolls on. I think Wolf is an ambitious film that it manages to capture many of the audience members' engagement throughout its runtime. Though an overly long runtime and the intense thematic material will certainly not make this film a film for everybody. I give The Wolf of Wall Street a B+.
Not bad. Justin, let's go to you. What did you think?
Alright, main characters in Scorsese movies are often portrayed as honest interpretations of human beings. These are not necessarily the most likable of characters, but realistic characters nonetheless. In the case of DiCaprio's protagonist, playing the protagonist of Jordan Belfort, the man is a complete and utter scumbag, but also a product of the time in which greed was good. Watching his rise to power is cringe-inducing, albeit occasionally darkly humorous, as Joe mentioned, but nonetheless intriguing, largely due to some of the clever editing by Scorsese that satirizes the power of money, and also during the loopy kind of drug trip sequences that occur throughout the film. However, similar to when we discussed American Hustle last week, Wolf tries to go down a number of different directions. Some of these directions connect, but they often spend a little too much time in each one. And because of that, it feels often overlong and occasionally even a little repetitive. The Wolf of Wall Street is definitely not Scorsese's best, but it's a different kind of style from the director, and I have to respect that. And for that, I give Wolf of Wall Street also a B+.
What is Scorsese's best? Taxi Driver?
That's a good question. I would probably say either Goodfellas or Casino.
Oh yeah, you do love Casino. You and Joe both.
Goodfellas probably his best, but Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, up there.
Yeah, there's a pretty big pool to choose from.
Honestly, I could see about 5 or 6, 7 films being in that roster, all being decent answers.
Okay. Sounds like a good future top 5.
Possibly.
I would agree, yeah.
I like
and we're also forgetting a big one, Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York, yes. I don't know if everybody considers that his best, but that's probably my personal favorite.
Very good. Well, for The Wolf of Wall Street, I was not as excited to see this movie as everybody seemed to think I was. Justin was sure that I would want to lead this one on the show.
I thought you
DiCaprio.
were. I actually thought you were too because of that. He's like one of your favorite actors.
Here's the thing. He is one of my favorite actors. But of all the movies we have on this week, I've been really looking forward to Mr. Banks and Walter Mitty by far the most.
Okay.
So, that being said, I was getting more and more pumped, though, as we, at the theater, started having, like, the standees with Leo's face on it. And I was like, all right, I'm getting into it. I knew it was going to be 3 hours, so...
You're ready.
I was a little bit unsure of that, but I was definitely getting excited as it came down to it. However, I would say underwhelmed was probably a good word to describe how I ended up feeling about it afterwards. DiCaprio's Jordan, though slick, is not a very likable character, and 3 hours is far too excessive, like Joe mentioned, to show us that he's a drug-addled jerk with scene after scene of him with hookers or strippers, doing cocaine or pills, or scheming to screw the government. There were definitely things to like about the film, especially the performances. You guys both mentioned, the chemistry between Jonah Hill and DiCaprio, and I was really looking forward to seeing Matthew McConaughey, because in the trailers they really kind of highlighted him.
They made it seem like he was this huge part of the movie.
Yeah, they made it really seem like a three-hander. Jonah Hill, DiCaprio, and McConaughey,
honestly,
all in this film.
One could argue that McConaughey's character was important to kind of getting things started.
Oh, he certainly was.
With his ideal basically kind of shaping him.
Right.
But I do agree they marketed that cleverly.
Yeah, they really did. He's in only 2 scenes of the film, so after about 5% of the movie is over, we never see him again. And it's really a shame, because I did love his character. I was originally going to give this movie a C+, but the beauty of having our 2013 wrap-up show next week is that now's the time to give everything an overview and have all the grades laid out and move some movies up or down grade-wise that don't really fit with the rest of the pack. Well, the C+ category for 2013 includes things like The Purge, The Internship, White House Down, and Gangster Squad. And though it does have its problems, Wolf of Wall Street is decidedly better than any of those. So I'm going to give it a B-.
All right. Live with that.
Understandable.
I wish it wasn't so long. 2.5 hours, I think,
honestly,
could have really told the story.
I honestly think they probably could have cut close to an hour, and it would have been okay.
I agree.
Maybe like 2 hours, a little over.
Yeah.
There was a solid 45 minutes you really didn't need.
Yeah.
Most of the movies we'll be talking about tonight are probably prime candidates for Oscar nominations.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I'm actually probably going to bring this up with all the movies we're talking about a little bit. As far as Oscar noms go, how do you feel about this movie, just in general?
With the slate that's out there, now granted, there's a few that none of us have seen yet because they haven't been widely released. Her and August Osage County are, I think, 2 of the prime
Don't forget Nebraska.
candidates. And Nebraska
Oh, I love to see
are 3 of the prime candidates being spoken about and have been nominated for Golden Globes and stuff. So with not knowing how I would feel about them, Wolf of Wall Street, to me, could do for some acting performances, but I think a Best Picture or a director nod would be a miss. What do you think?
I could probably get behind that. I do think that there might be some nods towards screenwriting. I think that it was kind of a clever narrative. It stood out to me a little bit. I mean,
the nice thing about screenplay is there are 10 nominees because you have the adapted screenplay and the original screenplay. So I could see
true.
that. I
And
suppose.
Wolf will be up for adapted, so
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it does have that Terrence Winter indicative style, and it goes along with a lot of Scorsese's previous films, and it was unique and it was engaging, at least to me.
No, I agree.
It kept me kind of going through the 3 hours. So
Yeah.
I think in terms of writing, that's something that stands out. But definitely, though, hands down, I think the performances are noteworthy.
The only major problem I had with the screenplay, running time aside, is that the narration by DiCaprio on and off throughout the film, I was okay with, but there were 2, maybe 3 scenes where he spoke directly.
It broke the fourth wall.
He broke the fourth wall directly into the camera.
I'll be honest.
Instead of a voiceover, and
I kind of like that.
Well, I wouldn't have minded it if it was established. But the first one didn't happen for about an hour and a half into the movie, so it was a little jarring.
I don't know. Maybe it's because they felt confident enough about the character's voice that it wouldn't be that unexpected. I thought it was kind of like part of the whole dark humor of the story.
Yeah.
When he just kind of addresses that.
especially from a satirical angle.
Yeah.
I just would have appreciated it more if it was more consistent.
Oh, there was another question I wanted to ask you guys because we didn't really talk about it too much.
Go for it.
This film is marketed as a satire and as a dark comedy. How do you guys feel it did in terms of the humor department?
Actually, I thought the humor was okay. Laughing at a completely drug-addicted jerk is a fine line because it can really go
another direction.
It can go hit or miss, really no in between. And specifically, for example, the scene where DiCaprio took some expired pills, so he took way too many of them, and when they ended up hitting him, he needed to drive his car home.
That was
and that actually, for me, worked. I thought it actually was funny.
I like that too.
Yeah.
That was probably the funniest scene in the entire movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that, which is, I guess, why it came to mind.
That's a good one. I actually thought about that as well. That's probably one that sticks out the most in my mind. I like that because they kind of trick you, won't give it away, but it was pretty clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that part. Justin, we didn't hear from you about the Oscar nominees. Did you think that would be
at least Jonah Hill?
Some acting, maybe.
I'm not given the enormous pool for actor nominations that could be out this year. I don't see any way that DiCaprio could make it.
I don't either, sadly.
It's a bummer. I know he'll eventually do something amazing and he'll get an Oscar. It's only a matter of time. Obviously, it's been a while since 1997 when it would have been perfect, but
yeah, that's for sure.
He'll get one eventually.
It really is only a matter of time.
I wouldn't be shocked if he was nominated, though.
Yeah.
Every one of his performances, even honestly, in J. Edgar, which was a terrible movie, I thought he did a good job in it.
I mean, he's never given a bad performance in my memory.
No.
So I feel like he normally gives good, if not exceptional, performances. The guy deserves to win one. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. He's definitely not going to win this year if he gets nominated.
No, but I'm saying you might as well give it to him for mercy's sake like they did with Scorsese's Departed.
But I also don't want him to go the way of Tarantino where it's like, okay, he made a new movie, let's nominate him for Best Picture and Director and the rest of it just because he made a new movie.
Yeah.
Like, just assume, he's this guy, he must be good,
I do think Jonah Hill has a fairly decent shot at a supporting actor nomination. I mean, he already is an Academy favorite with the Moneyball, and the supporting actor pool is not nearly as tight as the actor race.
But to answer your question, I would say editing maybe, cinematography perhaps, but maybe a couple of the technical awards, but I don't really see it going for any of the big stuff.
Nothing major? Not even from the acting?
Not really. I think it's going to be a really tight race amongst much better films that have come out this year.
All right, well, we're going to move on here, and our next film is Saving Mr. Banks. Now, in this, Tom Hanks is Mr. Walt Disney, or just Walt for short, in this true story of how he convinced Mary Poppins author Pamela Travers, that's Mrs. Travers to you, played by Emma Thompson, to sell him the rights to her children's character after trying for 20 years to persuade her. It's a fascinating, until now untold story that is a must-see for any lovers of the classic musical Mary Poppins. From the start, we learn that Mrs. Travers has run out of royalty money for her book series and has an important decision to make. She desperately wants to not allow Walt to turn her beloved nanny into a singing, cartoony woman, but may be forced into it financially. From there, we meet the song and scriptwriter she's to work with in Hollywood, and she comes at everybody like a bat out of hell. Tom Hanks is undoubtedly one of the finest actors of any generation, and after a great performance just months ago in Captain Phillips, this one is even better. And it's funny, I knew that, of course, Tom Hanks was in the movie, but he really becomes the larger-than-life Disney, and until about an hour into the film, I kind of forgot I was watching an actor. There was a scene, and I don't remember what specifically was happening, but I was like, oh my god, right, that's Tom Hanks. He embodied the role so well. And the same can easily be said for Emma Thompson. And that's sort of how I thought the whole film went. It really brings you there between the scenery and the performances. The cast is top-notch elsewhere as well, with Paul Giamatti as Mrs. Travers' limo driver, Bradley Whitford as screenwriter Don DeGrady, Colin Farrell as Mrs. Travers' father in many flashbacks to her childhood, Jason Schwartzman and B.J. Novak as the brothers Sherman, Disney's main songwriters, and so many more. Here's the deal. In reality, Saving Mr. Banks does tread into saccharine territory, and sometimes the flashbacks get to be too frequent, and it likely deserves somewhere in the A- range. But between my nostalgia for one of my all-time favorite movies, Mary Poppins, and the incredible storytelling of Mr. Banks itself, it all hit me very hard, and I was in tears for nearly a third of the movie. So I have to say, I don't really care about its shortcomings. Mr. Banks becomes my third film of the year to get an A+. You guys just came from it. I'm very curious to hear what you think. Justin, let's start with you.
By all means, sir. As moviegoers, it's often easy to forget the efforts that go into films that we often watch. A cinematic experience is only as good as the sum of its parts, and that's truly at the heart and soul of Saving Mr. Banks. Although it does have a bit of a rocky start, and the flashbacks take more than a little bit of time to get used to, Disney crafts a story every bit as captivating as the whimsical film that they are making. This is largely thanks to Hanks playing the fiendishly charming Disney, and Thompson giving an equally good performance, if not even better, as the conflicted P.L. Travers. However, that's not to say that these leads aren't complemented by a number of phenomenal performances from the side characters, notably Paul Giamatti, as Dan mentioned. There are a few times where it does feel a little too good to be true, which is why I can't give it an A, but Saving Mr. Banks shines in the conclusion of 2013, and I give it an A-.
Well, that's about probably what it deserves, like I said. Joe, what'd you think?
Well, this movie is basically a love letter by Disney Studios to Mary Poppins. I think that's really quite evident. I really like how it mirrored Travers' life, but it didn't try to make it too overly sentimental all the time. I think it did try to tell a fairly true story as best as it could, while still being a Hollywood film. It's a movie that's heavily influenced by nostalgia, and that's evident. Obviously, it's going to affect the audience, including myself. I actually got a bit teary-eyed at a few points. It really did a good job at weighing those emotions. I mean, Emma Thompson's a great actress, and Tom Hanks, of course, is amazing. And I do agree, he embodied Walt Disney quite well. I was quite impressed by that. Thompson creates a very strangely likable character despite her very uptight nature, but I think that just kind of complements her and makes her more believable. And it was really interesting to see the parallels of the backstory with the struggles of the creative process, because I know this happens a lot in rights disputes, and it's just interesting to see that side of movie productions and adaptations from a book. And it was really kind of cool to see that really, I think, fairly honestly told for the most part. And of course, Tom Hanks was a perfect Disney. I will admit, it is a bit overly sentimental at points, but I would end with saying perhaps it doesn't matter. I also would give Saving Mr. Banks an A+.
Yeah! It's interesting to note that next year will be the 50th anniversary of the movie, and I think that's kind of why now's the time. You know, they just released the big 50th anniversary Blu-ray last month. I recently read Dick Van Dyke's autobiography, and so I didn't know much of the backstory of making Mary Poppins, but I did know the battle. They just touch on it very briefly in Saving Mr. Banks, but that P.L. Travers did not want Dick Van Dyke in the role.
No, it was a fascinating story. I didn't know much about it.
It really, really was. I mean, I didn't know anything about it except for that.
It kind of made me want to watch a documentary about it, actually. I'd like to learn more.
Yeah.
You guys both commented on something. You both mentioned the fact that you thought the flashbacks were a bit awkward. I didn't mind them at all.
I didn't think they were awkward per se. I just thought maybe there were one or two too many of them.
I agree.
I do agree that there were a lot of them, and I know they took getting used to, but the reason they didn't bother me is because they were very short.
Yeah, they weren't overly long except for maybe one of them.
I was going to say, there was one that stuck out to me.
One, but for the most part they were a couple minutes, which in movies with flashbacks is actually pretty light.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I personally thought that it was pretty smoothly integrated, and I did like some of the cool editing intercuts where they would kind of parallel, as I said before, some of the things that happened with what actually happened on the set making Mary Poppins, and really getting to see the influence of this woman's life on the character she created, and seeing why she was really conflicted about what was going to happen to her character in the transformation. But
and Disney himself makes a really, really good point in the film that I also never knew, is that he went through a similar event when he was destitute and somebody wanted to buy the rights to Mickey Mouse, and he said, "But that's my family, that's like my child," and she felt the same way, obviously, about Mary Poppins.
So he could kind of relate to her in that sense, creatively. That is true.
I wish he had told her that, though. Because, obviously I don't know what happened in real life, but in the movie he only tells it to the screenwriter and the songwriters. So, I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe maybe he thought that she wouldn't believe her at the time. I'm not really sure.
Right.
But I think the fact they didn't have that scene in there might have been just evidence that they were trying to stay as true as possible.
Right. And I think one thing that's great that I'm sure really helped the movie is that she forced them to record all of their sessions to tape so that she wouldn't, get the shaft from Disney or.
She was very clever about trying to not give up the rights too quickly. Right. She covered her tracks.
And so I think that's great because as we see during the credits rolling, those tapes still exist, and I'm sure they were able to run over all of those and kind of get a real sense for what the feeling of the room.
Come to think of it, actually, it's probably they dug it out of the Disney vault and probably used a lot of that as the basis for the movie.
I think so.
So yeah, no, I thought that was quite believable.
In terms of your question of Oscar nominations, I think of all of the movies we're going to talk about today, that is for sure going to be a front runner in maybe not a front runner, but a for sure nomination.
Oh yeah,
Best Picture. An acting nod for sure, Emma Thompson.
Definitely.
I don't know Tom Hanks just because of the Captain Phillips thing. I don't know how that works. Maybe I've heard maybe they're going to submit him as supporting actor in Mr. Banks.
That would make more sense.
And lead actor in Captain Phillips, which would be possible. But I don't think they've ever had the same actor or actress be nominated twice in the same category. So
not sure.
I could see that, but I can also see screenwriting. You know, when you think about it, the Academy is made up of movie lovers and former movie stars and producers, and it's a movie about movies.
Like you, I think that my grade is a little bit influenced by nostalgia.
Yeah.
But I kind of admit, I see where you're going with this. It might not necessarily deserve to win anything or over certain other movies, but due to the sentimentality of it, the fact that it's kind of focusing on a popular, monumental film, and that it was really well done, I just think that it'll definitely get some attention.
I wouldn't mind if Emma Thompson won Best Actress. I don't think I've seen a better female performance this year.
No, I think she...
Not in a leading role.
She really stood out. I haven't seen her in
Not
too
Gravity?
much... No.
So, I mean, Sandra Bullock will for sure get nominated, and she is a great actress. We know my thoughts on that. But in terms of performance, next to performance, it's Emma Thompson.
I would concur with that. I think Emma Thompson's probably given one of the best roles I've ever seen.
Better than Gravity, better than Cate Blanchett and Blue Jasmine.
I'll agree with that one.
You know, again, we haven't seen August Osage County yet. Yeah, for my money, the best female performance I've seen all year is Emma Thompson.
From what I can recall, I'd have to agree with that. She was really good.
Yeah.
But she's an excellent actress anyway, so I'd expect that.
You gave it a slightly lower grade. What do you think about the Oscar nomination chances, Justin?
Personally, I would much rather see Hanks get nominated for this rather than Captain Phillips. I mean, I could still see it being up for Best Pick, particularly if they're going to keep up with the 10 nominees option.
I think it's a guaranteed lock for a Best Picture nomination.
I hope so.
I really do. Just based on who the Academy is. So it makes sense. All right, well, let's move on here. Our third film is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And in this, Ben Stiller directs and stars as Walter Mitty, a Life magazine employee who has a much richer inner life than an outer one, frequently falling into daydreams with the people around him, often featuring a new co-worker, Cheryl Melhoff, played by Kristen Wiig, that he has a crush on. As the movie begins, Life is about to shut its doors as a tangible magazine and go online only, leaving many people's jobs in question. Walter receives a special roll of photographs from photographer and friend, the elusive Sean O'Connell, played by Sean Penn, and the new owners of Life want to use negative number 25 for the cover of the final issue. Only it wasn't in the roll. So Walter, with Cheryl's suggestion, goes on a quest all over the world to find Sean and get that negative, and also turning his daydreams into the stuff of real life. Now, I read the short story that the film is based on in 9th grade, and I had honestly forgotten all about it until this movie came out. And from a story just a few pages long, screenwriter Steve Conrad and Stiller have created an entire world for this character. The cinematography is beautiful during the intercontinental scenes. Stiller and Wiig play very well off each other, and Stiller really has some good directing chops. Now, this is far from his first directing gig, but I would say it's his best. Some of the choices he makes are very original and clever. As a side note, props to the MPAA, which I basically never give, for rating this as a PG. It does have minor language and a little violence, but there's a scene involving heavy drinking and then flying a helicopter that I'm surprised they let go by. But I'm very glad that they did. This is truly a family film, and there are few people left who make live-action PG-rated movies anymore, and the ones that do, Adam Sandler and Kevin James, for example, make terrible ones. But between this and Night at the Museum, Stiller does seem to have a knack for it. Anyway, this was a very welcome addition to the 2013 roster at the end of the year, and I give The Secret Life of Walter Mitty a solid A.
Whoa.
Joe, your thoughts? Now, we all just came from this as well. We saw this one together not an hour ago.
This is very fresh. Best thing about this movie for me, I loved the scenery. and I loved the cinematography and camera work. I just thought it was fantastic. And I thought it really worked with the theme of the movie being photography, the magazine. It was beautiful. Like, some of these shots were just great. The editing was amazing. And the music. I mean, I'm a big atmosphere guy, and that's something, Justin knows this. It really influences my grades, the movie. If I feel like I'm really in the movie, it affects me emotionally. I love that. And this movie has a lot of great atmosphere.
I agree. The music that was chosen, and there's not a ton of it.
No, but when it comes up, it really makes the whole thing feel a lot more epic, which it's supposed to do, and it really strengthens the narrative. The acting was good, and the dialogue was well done as well. I thought it was believable, it was catchy, some memorable lines, I think some quotable one-liners. The characters were likable, particularly Stiller's, as Walter Mitty.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good commentary on the changing times in media. There was actually some smart elements there. I appreciated that. And the overall message is about life and taking chances and exploring things by yourself. I mean, admittedly, it was a bit heavy-handed, but I think that was the point. It's really not afraid to make that message. It's supposed to be. It's one in getting it out there. Personally, the weakest part of the movie to me was actually the romantic plot. I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think it was necessarily super necessary. And I did think the ending was a bit safe and cliche. But once again, I think that's kind of what it was going for.
Yeah.
Still, there's a lot of clever ideas, good themes, and a really great message. I think Ben Stiller did a really good job directing this, and I give it a B+.
All right. Justin, your thoughts on The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
We've talked adaptations on the show and deciding what would translate to the screen and what would not. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, as Dan put it, was a short story and was largely episodic in nature, which kind of leaves it with a relatively hard concept to bring to the screen. For creating a deeper feature-length script without trying to rip off the 1947 film starring Danny Kaye, one has to really applaud the effort to bring something new to the table. That said, like its overall plot, it feels like it's missing something that really should bring home more of its dramatic oomph. The fantasy sequences are entertaining and often funny, but only 2 of them are spectacle-based, which is when it really works, and all of them feel as if they're cut entirely too short. This isn't to say that the film doesn't look absolutely gorgeous, as both my castmates have mentioned, and there are still more than a couple funny and engaging mystery elements of it. Reflection could definitely help for our best of next week, but for right now, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty gets a B.
Yeah, it's very hard to really come out of a movie and we did this last week with American Hustle. Within an hour we started recording the show. I know for me, I do like to spend a little bit of time. Like you said, some of these grades may change for the end of the year. I know just going over my end of the year list, there's been quite a few changes. I have to say, I did not think that the zoning out scenes, the daydream sequences, were short at all. I thought they were perfectly timed. Because a few of them, you definitely knew, okay, this is a dream sequence. There's a few sight gags, like you mentioned, that are clearly not actually happening in his real life. But you do have to remember that this is a, PG family movie, and little kids are going to see it. And I don't know that longer fantasy sequences would have worked, just in the sense that kids might be a little bit confused as to, is this a fantasy, is this his real life?
I'll be honest, the way it was shot, I liked what they were trying to kind of break him out of his fantasy, and the fact that his reality became very much like fantasy. There was a point where he kind of makes that decision to go explore, and I thought, wait, is this happened? Is this a dream sequence? So I was actually guessing a couple times,
right,
is this really happening?
I was as well.
Because some of the shots were just so broad and epic and had this great scope to them. I liked the dream sequences, but I'm glad that they kind of dropped them at a certain point, because I felt the strongest thing about the movie was the actual real narrative. And I think that's really what brought it out to me, because the movie just showed the beauty of the world as it was.
Well, and I think that's the point of the movie. Like you said, it was what they were going for. I think the fantasy sequences obviously are the hook of the film.
Yes, exactly.
Agreed.
But once you're in there, it really is all about him, his quest to find the photographer, his quest to get the girl. I do think the romance part was important, and not just for sappy reasons. I think because it really is showing him, in his quest to find the photographer, he's learning about who he is. And so for him to even get the courage to sort of become a little more forward with the Cheryl character, I think all sort of wraps into him growing as a character.
Maybe saying it wasn't necessary was too strong. I actually do agree with that. I guess I felt like I didn't like the way it ended. There's a scene.
That's fair.
There's a scene where he's on the mountain where it ends. And and he's okay with how it ends. And I thought, okay, he's grown as a person. The fact that they went another direction, which is really obvious,
right?
I thought was, like I said, not a very great choice.
It may have been safe.
I mean, it was safe, but it was fine.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I would have liked them to have pushed it a little bit more. But then again, PG, family, happy endings, whatnot.
Yeah, I would have been okay with either, to be honest.
I'm not saying words. I mean, I'll be honest. There were points where I thought it was a little slow and I was like losing my interest. But once we got to like that last act, I thought it was just so brilliantly climactically coming together.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I liked the ending a lot. So that's probably what influenced it for me.
Yeah, this was a very busy movie-going weekend for us. We've seen 6 or 7 movies in a matter of 3 days. And I have to say, this and Mr. Banks were the only two that I thought I wasn't bored with at all. I thought the length of them was good. So I actually thought the story moved pretty well.
I agree.
In Walter Mitty.
I was with it. I didn't think the pace was off on this one.
I don't even know how long Walter Mitty was because it kind of flew by for me.
I couldn't tell.
I think it was 2 hours. I might be wrong about that.
I don't think it was quite that long. I think it was probably an hour 45.
Something like that. You can probably check it now.
Yeah, but I thought it did kind of fly by. But I do like what you said, Joe, about the Life magazine shutting down and the plot of sort of taking it, because obviously this was a story that was written 60, 70 years ago, so obviously magazines and newspapers were thriving.
But the whole idea of the story, even back then, was about changing and kind of moving at times and feeling a bit out of place.
And that's why I like that they did that as well. I'm glad you brought that up.
Because as an individual, he feels out of place. There's a whole generation that feels out of place. He struggles with finding how to work the eHarmony site, and he doesn't really know much about cell phones, so it's like he's kind of still a man in the past.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
But no, it was good, though. I enjoyed it a lot.
Justin's actually not far off. It was 114 minutes. Boy, it did not feel like it.
Wow, it really was nearly 2 hours. Wow.
Very cool. All right, well, we do need to move on. We have plenty of other movies to get to. Up next, we're going to talk about Walking with Dinosaurs. Oh. Justin, we'll start with you.
Good luck.
I might need it, sir. Oh, boy. How do we summarize Walking with Dinosaurs? Patchy, voiced by Justin Long, is a young pachyrhinosaur striving to find his way in the world. Though when his father dies, he and his brother Scowler, voiced by Skylar Stone, must take over in leading their herd from the perils that follow. Movies like this are really frustrating to review because, had they done a couple things differently, this would have gotten a higher grade. Granted, this wouldn't have been a great film regardless, but it would have fixed a major flaw: the appalling voice acting. The thoughts are done through voiceover, and the dialogue is just beyond awful. Had they just scrapped this for relying on the actions and relied more on the well animation, which I actually did enjoy about it, was probably the only thing this movie had going for it, this really would have been an easy fix, and it probably would have gotten a C, and maybe would have been a lot less boring. I know Dan mentioned to me shortly afterwards he fell asleep for a couple minutes, and I came very close myself.
Doesn't happen often, but
yeah, it really doesn't. But that's
a bad sign.
This was this was definitely an evident moment of that. The prologue and epilogue featuring our favorite Carl Urban is completely wasted and just doesn't work at all. Walking with Dinosaurs is a mess. I'm not even going to try and hide it, and it gets a D.
Really? Why so high?
Like I said, I did really like the animation, and I think if they had emphasized that more and made it more action-driven from the actual dinos themselves, it might have been entertaining. But instead, they added awful voiceover, and they relied more on a clunky storyline that didn't really need to be there.
What do you think of Walking with Dinosaurs, Joe?
Well, as I've mentioned to both these gentlemen, I'm actually a big fan of the Walking with Dinosaurs documentary series. I used to watch it when I was younger. I try to catch their occasional specials they have. And I said it a couple times, and I'll say it again, I really would have preferred a documentary. Mm-hmm. I think it would have been more interesting, more entertaining, and more beneficial for kids, which I think this was aimed at, and would have been beneficial towards everybody. Because, I mean, they're just really good. And I agree with Justin. I think the animation was pretty good, as it usually is for these things. And it was probably the strongest thing about the movie. I also agree that the voices were pretty annoying. The story was dull and cliche, about as bare bones as you can get. And the thing that really angered me, besides the fact that I think it's really just a big insult to the documentary series, which is actually pretty good, especially if you love dinosaurs, the setup for this movie, for taking place, to put it in a narrative format with Carl Urban and the humans in the present day, it is so beyond lazy, because I'm going to spoil it, that there's a bird, some magical bird that I guess is immortal, not even a hint of why he can transcend time.
It makes no sense.
And he just goes up and talks to this kid. And apparently there's a magical tooth that can show him these visions of the past. The thing that annoys me the most is that without any of the setup or explanation, this kid does not even question that a bird is talking to him.
Yeah,
he has no expression.
What's
nothing.
up?
Doesn't even think it's cool. He's just like, oh, that is beyond lazy. That's horrible. It's so bad. And Carl Urban, easily the best thing about that. The best thing about the movie probably was the fact that he was there, but I'm wondering why he was there, because he's a great guy, great actor, but anybody could have played that. Mm-hmm. Why was Carl Urban in this piece of dinosaur doo-doo? I don't
yeah, it's not like he was advertised with the film.
Other than the animation, I will say I told him I was a little surprised, because there was a tiny hint of the documentary in which they did name the dinosaurs, say basically what the words meant in Latin, what they did, and they did have some brief technicals about what the dinosaurs' brains were like, how they moved. There was some basic, minute education for introduction to kids, so the fact that was there, I teeter on this, but I'm going to give Walking with Dinosaurs a D, just because there was something there. I'm thinking for a 5-year-old kid that's interested in dinosaurs, it's not the best thing you could show them, but it's a start.
Oh, it's a bad start.
It's a horrible start.
It's a bad start. Take them to a museum. Oh my god. I'm not even sure where to start. One of my most hated things in all of movies is when realistic-looking animals talk, like in The Owls of Ga'Hoole, for example. Mm-hmm. But here with Walking with Dinosaurs, I finally found something worse. Animals that talk and whose mouths don't even move. Or, worse still, animals that are making noise or roaring while they're supposed to be talking. It happens over and over and over again in this movie. The wraparound with Carl Urban, as you guys said, is completely pointless, as is the bird narrator / comic of the story. It's just... we saw it in 3D. Joe, did you see it in 3D?
Didn't bother.
Okay. The 3D is not very exciting. And really, other than the good art direction and cinematography, which was better in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, the movie is nothing but problems. It has no idea what it wants to be. Is it a documentary? Is it a cute kids movie? Is it a dinosaur love story? It fails at all three, so I fail it as well. It certainly takes the cake from Planes and Freebirds as the worst kids movie of the year.
Honestly, I'm very teetering on the edge of failing it. I'm trying to give it the benefit of a doubt, but if I change my grade to an F, don't be surprised.
Yeah, next week on the best stuff, worst stuff.
Possibly.
It might be there.
I'll contemplate it.
All right, I can't talk about it anymore. Let's move on to Mandela, Long Road to Freedom. And Justin is going to tell us all about Mandela.
It is the long walk to freedom. It's also the long movie to freedom, as Justin will tell you.
Yes, it was.
Main character, obviously being Nelson Mandela, played by Idris Elba, begins his career as a womanizing lawyer when he notices numerous injustices towards his people by white authorities. He then pursues a life of rebellion alongside his eventual wife, Winnie, dealing with the consequences that follow. Nelson Mandela had such a complicated life that it's hard to base a near 2.5-hour film on. As such, the film has a great performance by Elba, but the film lacks the emotional power it's striving for. Alongside that, elements either feel underdeveloped or run on too long, making it just feel off. However, the look and feel of the cultural spirit of the times is absolutely spot on, which will allow me to give Mandela Long Walk to Freedom a B.
Not bad. You're right, it's Long Walk to Freedom. I think I called it Long Road to Freedom.
It's the same general idea.
But he walked on that road to freedom.
Just Mandela. Yeah.
Joe, what'd you think?
Well, I'm really quite interested in history, as you guys know. I know a little bit about the South African conflict and the long road to freedom, the civil rights marches and whatnot, the protests, basically the Civil War. I agree with what Justin said. Mandela had a very long, prosperous, and complicated life, and to try and crunch that into a 2.5-hour movie is difficult. I do agree. I think that the performance given was fantastic, but I also felt that you said certain elements were underdeveloped. I thought things were pretty well tied together for the most part, but I didn't really feel like I knew Mandela until about halfway through the movie. It was almost like the audience was meant to assume, yeah, we know everything about Mandela. We don't really need to get to know him as a person. We just need to go directly into these acts. And I wish the movie would have slowed down a bit in the beginning to show us who he was. And we had snippets of it, but I agree that we could have had more to show him as a person. But I think it's mostly the performance that really kind of brings that out, so it doesn't feel like it's totally lost. And I think the performances all around were great. The pacing was decent. I mean, it did feel long, but I was satisfied with the end of it. There really isn't a whole lot to say about it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fairly solid, and I would give it an A-.
Yeah, to me it didn't seem overly long. I mean, it is about 2 hours and 20 minutes, but like you both said, I mean, what an incredible story to tell. You're not going to condense it into an hour and a half satisfactorily. So you do have to sort of take a little bit of a longer approach. I'm old enough to remember when some of this stuff was happening, later in his life when he was still imprisoned in the 80s and, all the apartheid stuff, and then in the 90s when he was released. I mean, it was a huge deal.
It's actually pretty appalling and scary to think back about it, that I was like about 5 or 6 years old when these protests and fights and all these like horrible things were being committed.
Doesn't seem like it should have been 60 years ago.
Up to the mid-90s, they were still having problems that we got past in the 60s.
Yeah.
It's pretty frightening.
Yeah, Idris Elba is absolutely amazing. I really, to be honest, of all of the performances we've seen this year, I wouldn't mind if he got nominated for Best Actor. I thought he did a great job. It's not easy to play a figure that's that larger than life and who at the time of filming was still alive.
It's interesting. I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but I believe you guys both saw Invictus, right?
Yes.
And more... You didn't?
I did.
Okay, well, Dan, you saw Invictus, and...
Terrible movie.
Terrible movie, but most people agree that Morgan Freeman did a great job as Nelson Mandela. And I remember some people saying that he was, like, born to play that role. Now, I honestly thought that Elba actually did better than Morgan Freeman.
I did as well, and I think what's funny is I think a lot of people were saying he was born to play that role because he looks more like Nelson Mandela than Elba does.
I thought Morgan Freeman's a great actor, but I felt that it was Morgan Freeman playing Mandela.
I completely agree.
I didn't feel like it was Mandela because... And I guess maybe I made the comment to you guys that I thought he was channeling Morgan Freeman.
Right.
Because he had like the same inflection in his voice, but I realized that was Freeman channeling Mandela's voice. I thought that Elba did it much more naturally. And that's why I gave the movie such a high grade, because his performance was just so powerful. I thought he carried this movie.
He did. And what's funny is Morgan Freeman, as we all know, is a great actor. Mm-hmm. But he can't really change his voice. And if he can, he never does.
That's why his voice is so famous.
Exactly. But Elba, I mean, we've seen him in so many different things over the last few years. He had a run of episodes on The Office. He was in Pacific Rim this summer. He did that awful Beyonce movie where she's stalking... The woman from Heroes is stalking him.
I believe he also has the show Luther, if I'm not mistaken.
He's on the BBC America show Luther.
He's got some range.
And... he's got a different voice in every single one. His accent for Mandela, this South African accent, is nothing like he's ever done before, and he nailed it.
Honestly, I didn't even realize it was him.
Yeah, talk about, I honestly, not knowing that the character was the person.
It must have gone over my head. I just looked over and like, oh, wow, it's that guy.
Well, I love that guy. Look like him at all.
No.
If he doesn't get nominated for an acting award, at the very least, the makeup... people are gonna be nominated for this movie.
I agree.
Especially the sequences where he was aging.
Where he gets older and,
He looked older.
He really did.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
Prometheus could take a lesson.
I have not given my grade, but I give Mandela The Long Walk to Freedom a B+. So, right in between you guys. We have 2 more new releases to get to, so without further ado, let's do that. First is Justin Bieber, Believe, which I'm going to talk about. It's ironic that the other concert documentary this year was for the band One Direction, because Believe had no direction. This is the second Justin Bieber movie in 3 years. Never Say Never gave us an inside glimpse to Bieber's life, including growing up, getting discovered, and becoming a huge star, all leading up to a concert at Madison Square Garden. But now that all of that is out of the way, what else is left? So Believe is part Michael Jackson, This Is It, with some behind-the-scenes stuff of putting together the concert and putting together his music videos. It's part concert movie with full performances of about a half a dozen songs, and part showing us how his life has been since the last movie, since he quote-unquote grew up. I put it in quotes because even he says several times in the film he's only 19, and he's only human, and he's going to make mistakes. Personally, for me, his first mistake was refusing to shave off his non-mustache in the first scene that makes him look ridiculous. Even his mom calls it a pathetic attempt to grow facial hair in her sole interview segment of the film. And the movie is never engaging enough to captivate anyone but a true believer. And I do like his music, but unlike, say, Katy Perry, Part of Me, or even One Direction, Believe never made me want to go see a Justin Bieber concert, which is, after all, the point of a concert film. I gave Never Say Never an A- in 2011, so understand this grade isn't from a hater, it's from a realist. Believe gets a D+. Now, Joe, you saw some of this movie.
I thought that some of the music was okay, honestly.
Yeah.
I thought the interviews, some of them seemed pertinent, some of them didn't. I think my biggest problem was I felt that the scenes that I saw didn't seem like they were adding a whole lot of crucial information because not much has really happened in his career since then.
Yeah, it's true. And
like the whole movie felt like padding to me for the most part.
Yeah, I think it was. I think, honestly, a lot of it is sort of damage control from some of his antics the last couple of years.
I know that he has had some issues in the press, and I guess that this is sort of a reaction to that,
right,
to kind of bring him back to his fans and show that he's a nice guy. But being somebody that's kind of heard some of his remarks and even taken one or two of them personally, I can't say I'm going to get behind him after this.
Yeah, I mean, it did an okay job. Like, the concert scenes were good. The choreography was decent. The set pieces on the stage were good. I found the most riveting interviews actually with the people aside from Bieber, and they actually don't interview him all that much anyway. They kind of interview more of the people around him.
I agree with that. I actually found a lot more of their insight more intriguing than his.
Yeah, like there was a scene towards the end of the movie where, to be honest, I don't know who it is, his tour manager or just his regular manager or something, but he goes out and gives tickets to girls that either, couldn't get tickets, or he upgrades lousy seats to front row or whatever. And he was saying that, they showed all this in Never Say Never, and so they still do it for every concert, but he has to be, like, super secretive now because everyone knows who he is. And I was visiting Washington, D.C. over the summer when there was a Bieber concert playing at the Verizon Center, which is right at the train station, we were taking the train.
Perfect.
And oh my gosh, the screaming throngs of girls when nothing was even happening. I don't know if they thought they saw the front row ticket guy somewhere, but I mean, it really is, to his fans, this huge deal. And what the movie's going to do is nothing. It's not going to convert new people to him. And, like you said, there's nothing new to say.
Well, one thing I want to ask is, I thought that the audience that was viewing the film with me, most of them seemed really, really engaged in it. So I guess for fans of Justin Bieber, will it be a more successful... Like, what does it add?
Yes,
anything?
I mean, the people I went with are 4 girls that we work with that are believers, and they were crying. They were taking pictures on the screen with their phone when there was a cute shot of Justin.
You'd say that it's a success in some degree.
I would say that for a hardcore fan, sure. Here's the question. What could a Justin Bieber film do to detract a hardcore fan? I mean, I think anything that they put on the screen is going to be a success for a hardcore fan.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? So for me, a casual fan, I mean, I have a few of his CDs. I have, plenty of songs on my iPod. I wouldn't pay money to see a concert. So I'm sort of in the demo of like, okay, let's see what the film has to offer. It didn't offer anything.
Gotcha.
All right, and we have our final new release, and that's the Home Media Moment, and the movie is Drinking Buddies. And Justin's going to tell us about that.
Okay, so Kate, played by Olivia Wilde, and Luke, played by Jake Johnson, are 2 coworkers who might be significant others if both weren't currently involved in a prior relationship. Though after Kate's boyfriend, Chris, abruptly breaks up with her, she begins to explore her relationship options, possibly with Luke. What's great about independent cinema is a great opportunity for audiences to see actors that are normally a bit more mainstream and see them when they're a lot more raw and a lot more getting down to their core. Wilde seldomly does anything to really impress me, but her role alongside the rest of the ensemble managed to really captivate me. As such, Drinking Buddies feels honest without being goofy or overly sentimental, but the problem comes from the barely present narrative which often plays out in episodic segments. That said, Drinking Buddies is still a fun, character-driven drama that I give a B.
It really does have a good cast. You know, you mentioned some of the names. Anna Kendrick, one of my favorites. It's a good cast plus a minimal set design, and so it really does make the film about the characters and their situations rather than more elaborate things. You don't get fall-down funny belly laughs from this movie, more like chuckles at, oh, that's kind of cute kind of lines. But it's definitely got its funny moments, but more than that, like you said, it's about honesty and real life and the situations that arise when people get involved with their friends' significant others. The show here this week is long enough on time, so I'll just leave it there and also give Drinking Buddies a B. All right, let's move into our top 5. This is one that, I don't know about you guys, I had one of the hardest times of the entire run of Film Fanatics with this one. There are so many good choices. We're talking about our most anticipated films for 2014. Joe, as usual, we're going to start with you, and let's hear 5 through 2. What are you most excited to see next year?
Well, I looked through the list, and I have to agree, as it was harder for me to kind of pick things off because there are a lot of movies I actually do want to see. Mm-hmm. But I narrowed it down, I think, pretty well. My number 5 is Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. I love the original Sin City movie. I think it's a really awesome comic book film, and I have been waiting for this sequel for a really long time. I hope that it's worth the long wait. My number 4 is Dawn of Planet of the Apes. I thought that Rise was surprisingly pretty good for a reboot/reimagining, and I thought they did an excellent job with it, especially after watching it recently on Film Fanatics. And that got me really excited to see how they continue on with this new franchise, because I love the Planet of the Apes films, and I like what they're doing with it.
And James Franco's not in this one, right?
It's Gary Oldman, so it'll be just as good, if not better.
Yeah, great.
Upgrade.
Upgrade. I've actually heard some people call it the upgrade. My number 3, Justin will appreciate, it's Godzilla. I'm a big Godzilla fan, and it's his 60th anniversary, so hopefully it'll be an excellent film. It looks like it's got a great cast, a good director. Godzilla looks awesome. They're really keeping this secret, but I think it's going to be a good film at the very least, and it's just going to be good to see Godzilla on screen again, hopefully done right in America. It'll make the little inner child of me really happy. Number 2 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm really excited for this one because I did like the newer version of Spider-Man, as I've told both of you guys, but I'm really excited for this one because it's going to take Spider-Man in a newer direction, and it's going to try and build up the Sinister Six, which is like the ultimate battle that Spider-Man has to fight, at least on a citywide basis. It's going to have a lot of villains, a really intricate storyline based on Ultimate Comics, which has some of the best Spider-Man stories ever. So if they do it right, it could potentially lead to something really awesome for years to come.
You know what, Joe? Go ahead and finish it off. What's your number 1?
Well, I'm curious. Why'd you want me to...
Just because, I don't know, I like this list so much, I don't want you to stop.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I put some heart into this one. My number 1 is X-Men Days of Future Past. Oh. I think that the X-Men franchise has had some really great movies, but it's also stumbled a bit. And I think it's coming back stronger. And I think the interlocking of the original cast with the newer first-class X-Men franchise, it'll kind of reinvigorate something in which we can see some of these older actors, if they don't necessarily want to stay on, they'll have a good send-off, and they'll still have an opportunity to keep these newer cast members going. Or it could be the pinnacle and one of the greatest X-Men storylines ever done, brought to film, and if it's done really well, it could be something really memorable, one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. It's definitely really ambitious, but I think it looks excellent, and at the very least, if this is the end of this particular, send-off for the X-Men, and it's the beginning of something new, I'd be fine with ending this one. And if not, there are many more great storylines that are just as good, if not better than this, they can do, such as Age of the Apocalypse and whatnot. So, if they pull this off, it could be my favorite superhero movie.
Cool. Yeah, X-Men and Spider-Man were both on my short list. I had about a dozen movies that I was going back and forth on. I am excited about the X-Men. Neither one made my list, but First Class is my favorite X-Men movie. Yeah, it's interesting when looking through all these. Justin, I don't know how you felt about this. We'll hear your list momentarily, but it's a lot easier to anticipate sequels or, like in the case of Godzilla, reboots of franchises because you know the franchise, you know the characters.
I just realized, even as you said that, 4 of them are sequels, and Godzilla is still part of a franchise.
I'm the same.
Yeah, so
four minor sequels, and one is not technically a sequel, but it's a movie version of something.
So it's something we're all familiar with. Something
Yeah.
about. We have some confidence.
There were only
At least
a
I do.
few on my short list that are not, like Maleficent didn't make my top 5, but there's one. I mean, obviously, the character we kind of know. This is sort of in a new
You bring that
vein.
up. I really like Maleficent, the character. Definitely the best thing about Sleeping Beauty. And it was on the short list, but I'm a little iffy about it. I like Angelina Jolie, but it looks like it could be awesome. Looks like it could be really corny, so...
Right.
I'm like,
It could go either way.
I'm hoping it's going to be the next Also Great and Powerful.
I hope you're
That's
right.
what I hope, too, because I thought that was a great movie. Justin, why don't we go with yours? What is your top 5 most anticipated for next year?
This ought to be good.
Okay.
I know, I can't wait.
Here we go. Number 5 is same as Joe, and that will be Sin City, A Dame to Kill For.
Yeah.
Admittedly, this one's a bit of a wild card because we only have production stills to go off of at this point. It was supposed to come out in October of 2013, but got bumped back to August of 2014 for reasons unknown to me at this point. That said, after nearly 10 years with nearly everyone, albeit Dwight this time around is being played by Josh Brolin because it takes place before the events of the original.
Not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing. I'm actually looking forward to that, to be honest with you. I can't help but be excited thinking about where it could be going next, particularly with the addition of Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, love him.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Frank Miller's wacky noir blew me away the first time round, and I can only hope it continues the streak. My number 4 is Seth MacFarlane's A Million Ways to Die in the West. Like Sin City, this one's also a bit of a wild card, but I have to say I'm curious about how director Seth MacFarlane's sophomore attempt is going to go. Ted certainly divided Dan and I, but I thought it was hilarious and somewhat of a guilty pleasure, and the thought of his next one being a Western comedy only furthers my intrigue. Throw in Liam Neeson and one of my favorite celebrities, Charlize Theron, and it could make for one truly entertaining film. My number 3 is Into the Woods. This one won't be out until about this time next year, so there's not too much to report on that. However, the musical's been a hit on Broadway, and I really can only hope that they bring some of that magic to the screen. Adding in a great cast like Meryl Streep, Anna Kendrick from Drinking Buddies, and Johnny Depp, who, as much as I hate to admit it, does actually have musical talent, it should be a great conclusion film for 2014. And my number 2 is Godzilla. It's been 16 years since the atrocity that Joe and I only refer to as 98 ruined my childhood, but this looks like a huge step in the right direction. Director Gareth Edwards, who showed his talent in 2010 film Monsters, showed that a great monster movie is not just about the monster itself, but about the people involved, and that's essential to bring the spirit of Godzilla to the screen. My number 1 is also like Joe, X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
As we mentioned in our top 5 best Marvel movies, I really do enjoy the X-Men installments. However, with X-Men 3 The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine, it's tempted to crush my faith in that overall franchise, until First Class, as we've discussed earlier. Now with the original director and hasn't made a good movie since the series, Bryan Singer is back at the helm.
But echoing that, though, Bryan Singer does X-Men. That's what he was pretty much born to do.
It's true.
And when he tries to go away from it and do Superman, he makes 2 franchises terrible. So
And the movie that we will only refer to as 06.
2006, that's right.
This truly looks like it could be the best installment yet, merging both storylines to add dual potential franchises, well worth a look at.
It is really hard to put in your top 5 most anticipated movies that we don't really know anything about yet. Like you said, Into the Woods, great on stage, but it doesn't come out for almost an entire year, so who knows. And I went back and forth on that because I had Horrible Bosses 2 on my list, which the original was one of my favorites from a couple years ago. There's 2 kids' books that are being turned into movies, Paddington and Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. But I mean, have they even started production yet? So I am looking forward to all of those, but I couldn't really put them on the top 5. My number 5 is How to Train Your Dragon 2. This was a huge surprise movie for me when the original came out. And I went to see it kind of thinking, all right, we'll see how it is. It didn't look very appealing, and it turned out to be one of my favorite movies of that year. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, Dan, it was my number 6.
Was it?
It was very close.
I would probably consider it the same, yeah.
Yeah, that was sort of on and off my number 5, but at the end of the day, I really, really am excited to see it. DreamWorks has a bit of a hit or miss history with me with sequels. The second Shrek is my favorite. Kung Fu Panda 2 I didn't really care for, so we'll see how they do with this one. My number 4 is Jersey Boys. Now, I sort of flirted with this and Into the Woods, both being Broadway musicals that are being turned into films, but of course I only wanted to put one on the list. And I went with Jersey Boys just because it's one I've always wanted to see on Broadway. The music is fantastic, and Clint Eastwood is directing, so I think it'll be very, very interesting. Number 3, we've already seen the previews for, and that is 22 Jump Street. The first film was my favorite comedy of last year, 2012, and I'm very excited to see what they have in store. The preview looks absolutely hilarious, so I'm very excited about that. Number 2 is the only one on my list that I don't really know a whole lot about at this point, but it is a sequel that has been in the works a long time, and that is Dumb and Dumber 2. Finally, it has a release date. Will it actually come out in 2014? I don't know. I may get it may be on my top 5 most anticipated for 2015 as well. But finally, at least, they're shooting it, and things are in motion with it. The Farrelly brothers are back. Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are back. So hopefully that will be a good one. And my number 1, should come as no surprise to anyone, is Muppets Most Wanted. The preview has been running in a lot of the movies that we've been watching lately, especially that there's a lot of family movies out and a lot of Disney movies out now for the holidays. And Muppets Most Wanted never gets old with the previews. Some of my favorite actors are in it: Ricky Gervais, Tina Fey, and of course all the cameos that hopefully they didn't spoil all of in the preview.
Heck, Danny Trejo.
Danny Trejo's in it. Zach Galifianakis is back. I know one of your favorite cameos from the first one.
Ray Liotta's in there.
Ray Liotta's in there. We'll see. That, I guess, is the first on my list that comes out. I think all of the others are summer, or Dumb and Dumber 2 is in November. So Muppets Most Wanted comes out in March. So very, very pumped for it.
Well, Justin and I saw that coming. But
yeah, I mean, that was a pretty obvious number 1.
But that's still good. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, let's move into our triple feature, and we have the new classic first, and that's Pariah, which is a little indie movie, and our old classic, chosen by Joe, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and our Oscar A to Z is Agnes of God, a 1985 Jane Fonda film. First up, we're going to start with Pariah, and Justin is going to tell us about that.
Thank you, Dan. Pariah focuses on Alike, who is a young girl struggling with her sexual identity. She's an incredibly gifted student, but cannot seem to win the approval of her lifestyle from her parents, leaving her with the eventual decision to run or embrace her lifestyle, regardless of her parents' approval. Pariah benefits from great, polished writing with nary second wasted. The cast of relatively unknowns provides a wide assortment of powerful characters, and the result is not only engaging, but also devastatingly emotional. However, as the story unfolds, some of the more interesting characters, such as Alike's lesbian friend Laura, are left sort of by the wayside. That said, Pariah is one of those films that really makes me proud to be a critic. A film that comes out of nowhere, that no one ever hears about, and we get to give it its proper due. For that, Pariah gets a B+.
I like that review.
That was a good review, Justin.
A lot of passion.
I wish it was a little higher of a grade, but that was a good review.
It was a very good review.
Thank you.
Yeah, Pariah is a movie that has just gone unnoticed in the general consciousness, and that is a real shame. It never made it to more than 25 theaters in its run, wasn't nominated for any Oscars or Golden Globes, and I think it's a film that, with the right marketing push, could have easily been another Fruitvale Station. At least the black community took notice of this indie gem, earning nominations in things like the NAACP Image Awards and the Black Reel Awards. The acting is top-notch, and the lead actress, Adepero Adoui.
That sounds rough.
Don't know if that's right or not, but anyway, she's a great actress. She was fantastic.
Whatever your name, it was great.
She was fantastic as Alike. But for me, the true standout is an incredibly dramatic performance from In Living Color funny lady and Wei-In's sister, Kim. Her role as the homophobic and misunderstanding mother, Audrey, is absolutely outstanding. But really, all the performances are great. And when you compare this to another coming-of-age lesbian film, Blue is the Warmest Color, which we reviewed on the show recently, and I gave a B to, Pariah is really in another league, both in stakes of the lead character coming to terms with her sexuality, and just in overall performances and the gritty nature of the film. And I give Pariah an A. Joe, what did you think about Pariah?
Well, I think the thing I liked the most about it was how it really did a good job of capturing that gritty urban atmosphere. I thought that made the film seem very genuine. The dialogue was also very realistic and made the situation seem more believable to me. And it also had this really unique exploration to a very uncomfortable subject matter for some people. And I think that was accentuated even further by the great acting. I loved how the cinematography often made you feel claustrophobic, like the main character, in many of these situations. And I also thought the music was very enjoyable. It really stood out to me. There was
good music,
interesting tracks that I think, along with the movie, it's kind of something that would sneak up on you, and not a lot of people would probably talk about, but I wouldn't mind actually checking out. Like that style of music, that kind of gospel rock that kept popping up was pretty awesome, actually. I thought the ending was both heartbreaking and uplifting at the same time, which is kind of complicated to do, but they pulled it off. I think that really speaks to the directing. It's not something I guess I would normally choose to watch, but I'm really glad I saw it, and I'm really surprised to hear that it didn't get much more of a send-off, or it wasn't that noticed.
It's really a shame.
Like, when you said to a couple of the people that I invited to watch it that they probably haven't seen it, haven't heard of it, you weren't kidding. I mean, talk about a limited release.
Yeah.
Overall, I have to say it was a very well-made movie, and I would give it an A-.
Nice. Justin, I'm just curious. You gave such a great, enthusiastic review. Why the B+?
Well, like I said, I felt like some of the more memorable side characters did get thrown to the wayside, and I really would have loved a little more running time just to sort of flesh out the events that unfold in the film.
So you'd say you gave it a slightly lower grade because it was a little too short to you.
Yes.
I can
it is short.
I can see where it's coming from. I think that the point that they were trying to make was well made. But I agree with him. I think that some of those side characters that were just as good could have been fleshed out a little more, maybe like 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
I can see that. I can understand it. Still a positive grade.
I think that her friend's story kind of wrapped up.
My favorite character or performance was probably the father. And I thought that
was great.
They did wrap up his storyline well, but I thought they wrapped it up a little too quickly.
Okay.
And they could have expanded a little more to about his relationships, his kind of marriage falling apart in relation to his daughter's struggles. Like, we could see what was going on, but we didn't hear too much of it from him. I think we could have gotten a little bit more. That's an example.
Yeah, when I first saw this movie, I gave it an A-, and it was on the lower end of the A-. Like, when I ranked my best of the year, it was in the bottom 2 or 3 of the A-. But watching it again, it really, really is quite powerful.
It's a good movie. It doesn't pull its punches.
No, not at all. I mean, I guess I can get behind that maybe it could have been an extra 10 or 15 minutes to provide some further exposition with some of the characters. But,
a little more.
But it's definitely one to check out. I hope everybody listening seeks it out. I don't know if it's on Netflix or whatever. I own the film, so we just watched it from my DVD. But
if you're a hardcore fan of film or you just want to see something that'll surprise you, admittedly, it is a tough film to watch. It's got a lot of heavy drama, a lot of strong elements, but it's something that's very timely, and it's something that I think a lot of people should watch. They'd be able to really relate to these characters and what they're going through. It's a very down-to-earth story.
I completely agree. I'm glad we got to watch it.
I'm glad he showed it to me. I really never heard of it. I think it was good.
Yeah.
I think that's the point Justin was making in his review, is that even though he gave it a B+, he's still really glad that he saw it and was able to give it that review, because otherwise it would have gone unnoticed.
Yeah.
So it's still a positive thing, like I said.
Yeah.
Great review, really.
Thank you.
Joe, let's get to you for the old classic. You brought us Batman, Mask of the Phantasm.
You bet I did. All right. This film was released on Christmas of 1993, about 20 years ago. I didn't even think about that.
Yep.
And it's The Dark Knight's first and only animated film to be released in theaters. This story is within the canon of the DC animated universe and takes place between the first and second seasons of the beloved Batman the Animated Series. The story doubles as a decent crime thriller/mystery, as well as one of the better retellings of Batman's origins. The Cape Crusader, voiced by Kevin Conroy, is forced to take on another masked vigilante who seems to be taking out some of Gotham's oldest and most ruthless crime bosses. Being early in Batman's career, the police force have deemed him the prime suspect. While trying to solve the case, an old fling enters Bruce Wayne's life once again. This would be Andrea Beaumont, voiced by Dana Delaney, Bruce's first true love in this universe. Throwing the Joker, voiced by Mark Hamill, into the mix brings the plot into full motion, leading to a strong climax. This film is a great example of why this version of Batman is often considered by many to be the best interpretation of the character. With the combination of Conroy and Hamill's amazing voice work, the direction of DCAU creator Bruce Timm, and the writing of longtime comic writer Paul Dini, who often wrote many of the essential storylines in the 80s and 90s for Batman, this film creates a strong air of mystery, suspense, and even a little bit of humor. It also does a good job of exploring the character's motivations and darker nature. There are a few minor flaws, most notably that the mystery isn't really that hard to figure out, though the plot still manages to remain very engaging. Basically an extended episode of arguably the greatest superhero cartoon ever made, this film has been a favorite of mine for a very long time. It's one of my favorite Batman films, and I think for very good reason. I give Batman Mask of the Phantasm an A-.
Nice. Yeah, this show, Batman the Animated Series, it was out when I was in high school, and it aired weekday afternoons, I believe at 4:30.
Originally on Fox.
On Fox, yep, Fox 29 in Philly. But I wasn't really into the whole superhero thing back then. I didn't watch the Tim Burton movies. So while I did see bits and pieces of it when it aired, my brother would have it on. I was more into like Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, that kind of stuff.
The other good Warner Brothers stuff.
Yeah. So this was really my first full-on experience with this program's version of the Cape Crusader, and I enjoyed it. I picked out right away the voice work of Dana Delaney, as a Desperate Housewives fan as I am, as Bruce Wayne's ex, Andrea, and I loved, Joe, when you told me that she was also the voice of Lois Lane throughout Superman the Animated Series. I think that's really cool.
Probably the best one in my opinion.
Nice. I don't doubt it. I think she's a good actress. And aside from her, the movie has a great story and, of course, great animation. The show was known for that when it aired. Even though I never watched it, I knew that good animation, it was Batman the Animated Series, far and above anything else that was on television at the time.
It broke the mold in a lot of ways.
It really, really did. And like I said, even as a non-watcher of the show, I knew that. The idea that the movie was rated PG was shocking to all of us, I think, because it really is a very teenage and adult film. And if anything, I thought it was a little too short as well. It clocks in at what, about 75 minutes.
But I would say that they do a pretty good job of packing a lot of plot into that 75 minutes.
Oh, they definitely do. My assumption when we were watching it was that they probably kept it that short so they could break it up into 3 episodes as a 3-parter when they, sold it to the syndication package.
Didn't think about it, but that makes sense.
But I would have been fine with another 20 minutes of the show and made it a 4-parter, for the show. But I do wish also that it was made for a little bit more of a broad audience. I mean, it's obviously made for fans of the program. Not that I was lost at all. I mean, I sort of got what was going on. It's Batman, you got Joker, But maybe, broadening it a little bit wouldn't have hurt too much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about it. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad you brought it, and I give Batman Mask of the Phantasm a B+.
Nice.
What I always found interesting about the 90s animated Batman was the fact that, despite it being a cartoon, it wasn't necessarily a kid's show. I found the dark nature, no pun intended, to be off-putting as a kid, but now, as an older and wiser viewer, I can appreciate it so much more for that. Batman Mask of the Phantasm tells its story at an unusually balanced pace for its 75-minute running time, and doesn't tone down the violence any more than it needs to. While I can applaud this pacing, I still would have loved more time devoted to the actual character development, particularly with Bruce and Andrea, and I think that their romantic aspects get a little rushed for the sake of running time. All that aside, Batman Mask of the Phantasm is an impressive comic book film that does not get talked about enough, and I also, alongside Joe, give it an A-.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun to see that. And I believe they made 2 further direct-to-video movies, right?
Very good, yes. I'm glad you brought that up. They did Batman, Sub-Zero. That was another one, basing Mr. Freeze. And there was also Batman, The Mystery of Batwoman. I don't think either one of those are as good as this one, but they aren't bad movies.
And did they come out after the series wrapped up?
I believe Sub-Zero came out towards the end of the Batman original series, Batman the Animated Series original run, and Mystery of Batwoman came a little afterwards. Okay. But since all the cartoons in this universe interlock, I guess it took place as a flashback to Batman Beyond or something.
And what was Batman Beyond?
Batman Beyond is basically the future of the cartoon you just watched, where Batman's an old man, can't be Batman, trains a young kid in the future.
Okay.
So it's kind of all interlocking, basically.
Yeah, because this series came out right after Batman Returns would have hit theaters.
That's right, and it's funny, because of that, actually, it was partially the backlash from that one. I believe Siskel and Ebert actually preferred this film over that one, Batman Returns. They actually thought it was a more mature and solid film, which I thought was pretty cool. But the one thing that really aggravates me about this is that fans love this movie, and it's considered one of the best, if not the best, for a lot of people. And I think that's understandable. But I do agree it's not quite as accessible if you haven't watched the show.
Yeah.
But then again, Batman, it's pretty easy to get in there. Mm-hmm. The thing that really annoyed me about it was that this was coming at a time when Batman is really the show that kind of changed the game for animation. And this movie suffered because a lot of people thought this film was geared towards kids because it was animation, which is why at the time...
Which is why I mentioned that.
It only got matinee showings.
Right.
So all the older people it was really probably meant for, teenagers, adults, and fans of the show could come out and see it at night, never got to. So it really did not do well at the box office, but it was a critical success, and the years have showed people love this movie, and it's gotten a lot of love since.
Yeah, so another one to check out if you haven't.
Please do.
All right, our final film for this week's show is our Oscar A to Z, and that is Agnes of God, another one that we had not heard of until this feature. And it was out in 1985, and it got nominated for 3 awards, Best Score, and 2 acting nominations, one for Anne Bancroft for Best Actress, and Supporting Actress Meg Tilly. Norman Jewison, director of movies such as Fiddler on the Roof and Moonstruck, directed this drama that takes place at a Canadian convent. Jane Fonda plays Martha Livingston, a psychiatrist sent to determine if one of the nuns in the convent is sane or not. That nun being Sister Agnes, played by Tilly, who recently may or may not have given birth and may or may not have killed her baby. The whole film centers around a she said between Sister Agnes and the Mother Superior, played by Bancroft, and Martha becoming something of a mother figure to Agnes herself. We are not quite back on track from some of the A-range Oscar nominees we watched this past fall, but Agnes of God is a huge leap forward from the last few weeks of really subpar films. All 3 women give great performances, and I'm actually surprised Fonda wasn't also nominated for her role, though as we discussed while we watched it, it's quite possible that Hollywood was still upset with her for her political stances, because I thought she was actually the best actor of the 3 in the film. It does veer into movie of the week territory, and not just on 1 or 2 occasions, but overall it does have a good story, and it's pretty riveting, and I give Agnes of God a B-. Justin?
This latest addition to our Oscars journey serves as a great example of, as Stan put it, when the Academy just does not give enough credit where credit is rightfully due. While Anne Bancroft and Meg Tilly were deserving of their nominations, Jane Fonda as Martha really gives arguably the best performance of the bunch. I think alongside what you mentioned for her political stances, I think also her role as a bit of a sex symbol with Barbarella and, of course, her workout videos.
Oh, I know all about Barbarella.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, of course
that's true also. I mean, by the mid-'80s, she had her line of workout videos, and maybe she wasn't seen as such a serious actress anymore.
That was my theory on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But how she unravels the mysterious events that unfold is often suspenseful, and the conflicts with the other nuns, particularly with Mother Superior, are especially intense. The problem comes from the third act, when the answers are finally revealed, and possibly suggesting, as Joe pointed out during the screening, that supernatural elements may serve as a potential answer. It gets bizarre and exaggerated and somewhat destroying a lot of the tension that has been built up earlier in the film. Despite that, on performances alone, Agnes of God is well worth a watch, and I give it a B.
Well, not bad.
Yeah, not too bad. Joe, what'd you think? Better or worse than Afterglow?
Well, honestly, that's not a high bar to meet, but I can safely say that it's better.
Okay.
All right. This God, don't bring it up.
Sorry.
It's terrible. It's going to haunt me now. Oh, man. Okay, Agnes of God. I think One of the most positive things I can say about this movie is that I really enjoyed the cinematography, and I like the music. And once again, I love the atmosphere. And this movie really had a strong horror feel to it, which I think was probably one of the best things about it for me. It seemed like it was permeating the whole film. And it's kind of ironic that, as we found out later, there was kind of a supernatural anger sort of forced in there. And I was like, oh, maybe they want to take this a different direction. But I kind of liked that. It sort of kept me engaged in it. The best thing overall, though, is probably the performances all around, as you guys both mentioned. I mean, Jane Fonda steals the show, but Meg Tilly, they do a good job as well. They think that you don't really see a movie that has primarily female cast members do that as much, especially back in the day.
Yeah, that is true.
And I think that was quite impressive. And much like Pariah, I think it's tackling some difficult subject matter, especially for the time. We're seeing evil nuns again, kind of like in Philomena. It's kind of becoming a pattern. I did think it was a bit slow at points, but I was genuinely interested in the story and the result of the mystery. Though I'm not sure if this movie was supposed to be a mystery or a social commentary or both. I think it might have kind of gone up and down, sort of tried to hit both of those. I'm not sure if it decided exactly what it wanted to be. Its identity was a little unclear to me. But the ending brought in the supernatural, which was bit odd, but kept me engaged. I mean, I was surprised, and I kind of liked that little bizarre twist. Kept me guessing. Overall, I'd say it was a pretty good effort, and I could see why the Oscars would at least take a look at it. And I give Agnes of God a B-.
Very nice. Yeah, you brought up something very interesting. I mean, in 1985, there weren't a whole lot of female exclusive movies. This movie is almost all women. This is before Steel Magnolias, before Thelma and Louise, because I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it.
That's one of the things that really impressed me, is that for the time this was made, I thought that was a little bit ahead of its time, and the fact that it was engaged and so focused on being strongly held by these female actors, and I thought they did a great job.
I mean, another movie may have had the Jane Fonda role be played by a man.
Exactly.
Just to even
because
up
those
or
are roles that people will be used to.
Right.
You could definitely see that. Obviously, substituting a man for that, and you could tell, I think, by the way she was playing the character, that she might have been going for something a little more masculine or neutral. Not really sure, but I thought that was definitely something to take note of.
Well, I think she was more just trying to be professional. So she wasn't trying to. I mean, she, like I said, ends up sort of being a mother figure.
And I guess that sort of goes along with the general professional idea of being gender neutral, not going to the ideas based upon what's expected of one gender or another. But that goes into a whole other debate. But I still thought it was kind of at the center of the film to some extent.
Yeah, that's very, very good thought, Joe.
Thank you.
I didn't pick up on that. All right, well, that's going to do it for the show this week. Now, here's what's coming up. We've got a ton of great things. Next week is our best and worst of the year show. We're still going to do our triple feature, but we're going to have no new reviews. So there's a couple movies that are out right now that came out on Christmas that we haven't gotten to see. That's Grudge Match and 47 Ronin. We will talk about those in 2 weeks' time, along with the new Paranormal Activity movie called The Marked Ones, and as well the return of our top 5 and everything. But next week it's all about the best and the worst of 2013, so that is coming up. And then after that, Guilty Pleasure Month for our old classics, and we're going to do a little round robin. Each of us will pick one of our favorite guilty pleasure movies, and we're going to watch that for the old classics. So we may get some very negative reviews depending on what you guys think of the other person's movies. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. Very exciting. Joe, anything new, anything for the end of the year on the Merlin page?
Well, actually, as I recently said, I got 700 subs a little while ago. I've pulled in questions for my Q&A, and I think I've gotten a pretty decent amount. So sometime around the beginning of the new year, I'm going to actually do my Q&A video, and I'll probably be launching some other videos after that. But that's the main thing to look forward to.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you are a listener of this show frequently, please subscribe to Film Fanatics. We'd love to have you aboard. Of course, your comments are always welcome about any of the movies we talk about or our top 5s. Let us know what you're most excited about for 2014. And that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Twitter if you'd like, and that's at Film Fanatics Pod. And we'll see you back here next week for the best and worst of 2013. Bye!